That's usually his message for everything. Like, have I ever told you the story when we went to the really fancy restaurant when we first got married, and like it was the fancy restaurant where the menu they hand, the female has no prices, which is very misogynistic anyway. But we were starving and we were on vacation and we were looking for a place to eat, and my husband doesn't like to stand in line, so we found this place.
It was like fancy.
It was fancy, but not as fancy as you would think. And so they hand us our menus. Mine didn't have prices. His did. And then he looks over at me, and this was probably, we had only been married probably about 2 years, but this is a continual theme in our long, long marriage, that he's going to lean up to me and say, I'm going to tell you something, but don't make the googly eyes. And then I'm already making the googly eyes because like, what? And then he says, we just need to get up and get out of this place. And I'm like, why? He goes, I told you, don't make the googly eyes. Yeah, I can't not make the googly eyes. That's what I do. Make the googly eyes. All right. So we are on to page 12. For those of you that did not listen, you missed a lot. So we're on page 12. Make sure you go back and listen. Tomorrow is our test. I am going to tell you this will be the first test, and I'm only going to give you about 10 extra minutes in class. So tomorrow you need to have your brain thinking caps on. You need to get in here, take test. I'm going to give you 10 extra minutes, and then that's it. Because we need to get into that habit of being able to finish those tests in 55 minutes. All right? Everybody got that? Okay. All right. So we are at the bottom of page 12. It is important, I think, and significant for you to note, even though this is going to be in passing, that John Adams barely gets 3 pages of our notes. Thomas Jefferson's going to get a whole chapter. So there are presidents, again, that routinely kind of get placed back on the back burner. Adams is going to be one of those. Adams serves as the vice president to George Washington. We also need to talk about how the vice president was picked. The vice president was the person who got the second amount of votes. So they did not run as a ticket. So George Washington did not pick a running mate. John Adams became the vice president because he had the second highest number of votes. And that will be the case for quite some time, which will make for some really weird presidents and vice presidents, often of different political parties. And we'll meet that especially when we get closer and closer to 1860 with vice presidents like John Calhoun and other ones that will make it very difficult and different in the running of our country. So at the bottom of page 12, Washington resigns. He gives this fantastic farewell address. He leaves the country in a great place. And that, again, is also something that we will look at as we look at different presidents, how they left the country when they leave office. And again, one of the most important things done by George Washington is he keeps us out of war. That is the single most significant thing that George Washington does, is he keeps us out of war. I would say, in my opinion, the second most important thing he does is picking an awesome cabinet and picking those people that will help him run the country, not necessarily just support everything that he says. So at the bottom of page 12, we have the election of 1796. And John Adams from Massachusetts, who is a Federalist, is the Federalist candidate. Hamilton is too controversial. Hamilton greatly desires to be president. He never will be. Most of the reason is he is very controversial. Second reason, he's going to die fairly early or late in his life that will end, obviously, any aspirations to the presidency. The Democratic Republicans, Thomas Jefferson, and that's who they put forward. Adams versus Jefferson, 71 to 66. So that means for this 4 years, we have a Federalist president and a Democratic Republican vice president. And again, this is going to set up some weird 4 years because we have a leader of one party and a vice president of another party. And it will happen quite a few times. On the top of page 13, we have this thing called the quasi-war. Quasi means half. So like Quasimodo is half man. So quasi means kind of, sort of. So we're kind of, sort of having a war with France. And part of it is Jay's Treaty. When the French find out about Jay's Treaty, that we're working with the British, that we're trying to make nicey-nicey with the British, they see that as a betrayal. Like, hey, we were the ones that came to your aid to overthrow this country, and now you want to play nice with this country. Saw it as a flagrant violation of the Franco-American Treaty. And so now France starts to seize our warships. So now our ships are being seized by Great Britain and by France. And this is going to be one of the questions when we begin the War of 1812 that we will ask ourselves, why did we go to war with Britain and not France? Because we're going to go to war with Great Britain for seizing our ships. But France is doing the same thing as well. So we need to figure out why we do that, go to war with Great Britain and not France. So on page 13, in the middle of this page, we have this thing called the XYZ affair. I would put a box around this because, number one, it is a test question tomorrow on your test. But number two, it is definitely something the College Board likes to ask you about. Many textbooks, teachers, because as we, and you will know, I have to cut a lot of stuff in this course to get all the way to where we need. And Adams' presidency is one that's often cut out, just because there's not a ton of it in there. And actually, again, Adams is kind of just this federalist that promotes federalist policy and doesn't do much else. But this is one of the things that gets in AP exams quite a bit. It's called the XYZ affair. President Adams sends a delegation to Paris to approach and try to diplomatically smooth everything out. Like, let's talk. We are friends. We are your allies. And while there, the U.S. delegates are secretly approached by 3 French agents, codename X, Y, and Z. That's where we get that from. And they say, look, if you want to talk to our Prime Minister Talleyrand, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay us some money. You're going to have to slip us a bribe. U.S. delegates say, absolutely not. We'll say millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute, which means we are not going to be dealt with in a way that somehow negates our ability to negotiate as a sovereign nation. You're not going to demean us by saying the only way we can talk to the prime minister is if we pay you a bribe. We're a nation. We're worthy of diplomatic relations, and you should treat us like you treat any other country. Where we might be new, but we know how this works. And how this works is you should negotiate with us. We don't have to pay for anything. And at that point, war hysteria sweeps the U.S. We want war with France. We have been publicly humiliated, disrespected by France, who we thought were our allies, and let's go to war. So that's where we get the quasi-war, because we never actually declare war, but we set war preparations in motion. Navy, the Department of Navy is created, and we have 3 whole ships. The Marine Corps is established at this time. And I can tell you, hardcore Marines, they might not take their birthday off. They might not take their spouse's birthday off, but they take the day off on Marine Corps birthday. And they can tell you when it is, just like that. If you know any Marines, that's the first thing they drill in is Marine Corps. And heck fire on a Navy base on Marine Corps birthday is crazy town. Crazy. I grew up on Air Force bases, not familiar with the craziness that happens. And when my husband joined the Navy, I got a whole different, They are some hardcore, all about that birthday. Army of 10,000 will be authorized. Adams suspends trade with France, authorizes American ships to capture, and we have this undeclared hostility for 2.5 years. So it's undeclared. Most of it's going to take place in the French West Indies. U.S. and Navy privateers capture 80 French armed ships. Several hundred U.S. merchantmen were lost. Full-blown war seemed imminent, but Adams is trying really hard to keep us out. So, Convention of 1800, France becomes eager to negotiate a peace. All right, France says we need to negotiate. 1800s, this is now Napoleon. Napoleon wants to be done with what's happening in North America because he is taking over Europe, for those of you that don't know. He is in full swing to get all of Europe. Forget North America. I don't want anything to do with you guys anymore. So he also says, Napoleon also thinks they're getting a little too chummy with Great Britain. If we keep fighting with them, they might join Britain's side, and then I've got two enemies that I have to worry about. So Adams submitted to the Senate a new foreign minister to France. Hamilton's high federalist outrage, like, no, we want to bring France down. We could have never brought France down. Jeffersonians favored one last try for peace. So in the 1800s, U.S. negotiated with Napoleon. And on the top of that page, the Convention of 1800, France agreed to end the 22-year Franco alliance with U.S. This is Adams following through on George Washington's reminder that we should not get involved in foreign alliances. Untangle those alliances, get out. So Adams follows through on that suggestion from Washington. U.S. agreed to pay the damages of claims of American shippers. And the significance, again, is 5A, major war with France avoided. We would not have been successful in a war against Napoleon. We improve our relations with France. That will make the Louisiana Purchase possible in a few years. And again, if war had not been occurring, Napoleon would probably not have sold that Louisiana territory. Probably would have used it to invade us and probably ultimately change the course of history. All right, so that's positive things that John Adams does. Here is the big, gigantic thing John Adams does that always gets him a gazillion check marks on the naughty list. So when we think about presidents, you should be able to come up with pluses and minuses for every single president. Plus, 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 minus, minus, minus. Some are easier than others. I think it's a whole lot harder to find negatives with George Washington, but most of the time you're not asked to do that about him. We kind of hold him in this high regard. But for John Adams, you should be able to find some pluses. Yep, kept us out of war. But here come the negatives, and it is called the Alien and Sedition Act. So aliens are not, as my mom loves to believe, UFO aliens, extraterrestrials. These are aliens, immigrants that come into the United States. And the United States at this time has no immigration policy. You come to the United States, you stay 5 years, you are a citizen. End of story, full stop. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to file paperwork. You don't have to take a test. And that's the way immigration is in the United States until the 20th century. You come here, you stay here, 5 years, you're a citizen. End of story. That's probably how most of our ancestors immigrated into the United States. Hello? Okay. Thanks. Randy, do you need the folder dropped off or can you get it after class? Okay, thank you. Don't forget it's down there. All right. So, purpose. Federalists passed a series of oppressive laws to reduce the power of the Jeffersonians and silent anti-war opposition. So that's what the Alien and Sedition Acts. We always group them together, but they're two different things. There's the Alien Acts and there's the Sedition Acts. We always just group them together because they go together at the same time. Sedition means speaking out against your country, okay? So there's a fine line, right, between free speech and sedition. And that's that line that we're looking at. What can you say as part of free speech, and what can you not say that becomes treasonous or seditious? And that's typically what we look at. So the Alien Acts are attack on pro-Jeffersonian aliens. Here's why this happens. Most immigrants that come lack wealth and are welcomed by the Jeffersonians, right? Because the Federalists are the best people with a lot of money. So when new immigrants come, they more than likely, and this is again a generalization, will align themselves with the Democratic Republican Party. They align themselves with Jefferson, this idea of government for the people, agrarian societies. And so the Federalists feel threatened by this, that pretty soon that political party is going to be gigantic and take over. So how do we prevent that? We change the laws on how you become a citizen. So raise the citizen requirement from 5 years to 14. That's a lot. Note to self, if you're trying to do things to oppress other people, gradual suppression works really well. Gradual suppression works much better. Those of you that plan on being dictators or monarchs, gradual suppression so you don't even know that it's happening. But raising it from 5 years to 14, that's like a little old cowbell, ding-a-ling-a-ling. This is too much. We know what you're doing. President could deport, and again in quotation marks, dangerous foreigners. The government always puts itself in a bind when it uses adjectives not defined. What does dangerous mean? As my 56-year-old self, dangerous means a whole lot different to me than it does you, because half of everything you guys do regularly is dangerous to me. Danger, danger, danger. The way you drive your cars, the way you use social media. Danger, danger. So obviously that's really different. So that, again, allows a government a lot of leeway in deciding what's dangerous, which, again, is oppressive. I can tag you as dangerous, deport you. Laws in some ways seem sensible. Many agitators coming to the U.S., again, many from France seek out anti-British. But for the most part, these acts are unenforceable. They don't and can't really enforce them. The next one is the Sedition Act. Anyone who impeded the policies of the government or falsely criticized its officials, including the president, could be liable to a heavy fine and imprisonment. That crosses the line. As a U.S. citizen, I can criticize the president. I can say any critical remarks about the president that I want. There are things I cannot say. I cannot threaten the president's life. I cannot reveal, perhaps if I know certain secrets, I'm not allowed to reveal those to the public. That would endanger the life of the president. But I can certainly speak out against any president. I could stand on a street corner with a sign that says, I hate the president. I could do that. But I can't stand on the street corner and say, I want to kill the president. I will be swooped up, even if I stand on the corner of Casey's, probably in a matter of a day or two. Secret Service would be here after me. That's a difference. But what this seditious act does is it violates your right to free speech. This is one of the things, again, if we go all the way back to Peter Zenger, this ability to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. Please look at 3C. This one, they do enforce. 10 Jeffersonian editors were brought to trial and convicted. Law is going to expire in 1801, the day before Adams leaves. However, much like many acts that oppress certain groups of people, other people really like it. And so contrary to what you might think, and this is where you get stumped on test questions, popular support for the Alien Sedition Act. People like it. Anti-French hysteria played into the hands of the Federalists. Again, the Federalists are a small group of people that most people will never get to be part of that group. But again, that idea of oppression. All right, on page 15, Virginia and Kentucky resolution. Jefferson and Madison write a response to this. And again, we are still at the part of our country where every time somebody does something, we write a response. So we're going to have lots of these things. So Jefferson and Madison write a response. Republicans believed that Alien Sedition Acts were unconstitutional. And they were. Not so much the Alien Acts, but definitely the Sedition Acts. So Jefferson and Madison secretly created a series of resolutions. Why does Thomas Jefferson have to do it secretly? Because he's the Vice President of the United States of America, who is supposed to be upholding the laws passed by his administration, which is why this is always difficult, the way that we pick these presidents. So here it is in a gigantic box around 5C. States have a right to nullify unconstitutional laws passed by Congress. This is the beginning of the idea of states' rights. What are the rights of a state when they feel that the lawmakers in Washington, or I shouldn't say Washington, the federal lawmakers in the Senate and the House have passed an unconstitutional law? Jefferson says, especially as writer of the Declaration of Independence, we have a right to nullify. Nullify means to wipe out, null and void. It doesn't exist. People in Kentucky and Virginia, you don't have to abide by these laws because they're unconstitutional. This is the beginnings of these steps towards 1860. Aim not to break up the Union, but preserve it by protecting civil liberties. And then this idea of a compact theory, popular among 17th century English political philosophers, again, think Enlightenment, that these 13 sovereign states created the federal government and had entered a social compact. That word should sound familiar. So nullification, individual states were the final judges of whether a federal law was constitutional. And again, we are going to find out that is not true, because who is the final judge of whether a federal law is constitutional? The what? Supreme Court, right? They are the group of people. Now, it takes us a while to get to that part where we say that, but that will be the end. No other states passed the Jefferson and Madison resolutions. It is just Virginia and Kentucky. No other state picks this up, so you can see that this is not a popular belief. No, not even North Carolina picks it up. No one picks this up. Federalists are going to argue that people, this is the one thing, if you're looking for a check plus for Federalist on that big long list of naughties, this is their check plus. The people are the United States of America, not the states. And again, that's why I say that first line, we the people of the United States. It does not say we the states. It's the people that are that have the sovereignty in our country, not the states. So later used by Southerners to support nullification. And we are going to go crazy with this nullification. When John Calhoun is the vice president under Andrew Jackson, he's the vice president of the United States. He is going to secede South Carolina, and Andrew Jackson says, I'm going to come down to South Carolina. I'm going to hang you from a tree. I'm going to hang you from a tree, you nullifier, you. So that Andrew Jackson, John Calhoun is one of my favorite things because they are both wackadoodle crazy. All right. On bottom of page 15, Revolution of 1800. And I am not getting on a soapbox, but this is such an important thing for you to pound in your head as we speak towards an election. Federalist handicaps. Federalists split over going to war with France, Alien Sedition Acts, Federalists swelled in debt, military preparations now seem. So we got another election. If we turn the page, Federalist mudslinging. We're going to accuse Jefferson of being an atheist. He's not an atheist, he's a deist. His success with separating church and state, Robbing a widow and her children of a trust fund. He did that. Hamilton kind of messed around with that too. Fathering mulatto children. He did that too. Lots. And what will end up happening is a really great friendship between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams will be exploded, especially with the wife Abigail. And they will not speak to each other for a really long time until they get ready to die. And then, fun fact, they both die on the same day. They become great friends again, writing letters back and forth to each other. But this blows them up. Jefferson is going to defeat Adams. And this is where we'll look. New York was the key. Aaron Burr, we're going to throw him in this mix. Jefferson tied with Burr, the vice presidential candidate for the electoral vote. This is when Burr and Hamilton's feud explodes because Hamilton, even though he's a Federalist, hates Aaron Burr and will work in the House and the Senate to get Jefferson elected. House of Representatives had to break the deadlock. A few anti-Burr Federalists refrained from voting, and Jefferson becomes president. They are swayed by Hamilton. Please, 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 on page 16, in your most highlighted, arrow-pointing, dancing stars and bears and clovers and lucky charms, underline 3, significant. Peaceful change of power was revolutionary. Transfer of power based on an election that all parties accepted. No other country is going to do that for hundreds of years. And this fulfills the Constitution that says, we the people. We the people. The people decide. The people will decide the election. On the bottom of page 16, our Federalist legacy, we do need to know that. Federalists are going to really slowly die out, right? They're going to die out with this Adams, Hamilton end. But they do have a great legacy to leave. And first and foremost, you cannot think about positives of the Federalists without Alexander Hamilton's financial plan. It is what makes America. It is what keeps us moving forward and keeps us afloat. Washington's established important precedents for the presidency. Federalists kept the U.S. out of war. Again, important and significant. Perceived democratic gains of the revolution, fended off anarchy. Opposition party creates a two-party system, and then westward expansion. Okay. Again, for those of you struggling on how to study for this test, please make sure that you look at those questions for review. Either A, talk about them out loud to yourself. That is one of the ways I always reviewed for test. If you can't figure it out, I'm a talker, enjoy talking, like talking, talk to myself often. That's why I'm so thrilled with the whole Bluetooth generation now, because I can just talk in my car, and I think probably most people maybe think I'm talking on my phone, but I'm not. I'm talking to the most awesome person I know, me. And I don't shout at myself either or become aggressively passionate. Actually, sometimes I probably do, but I don't scare myself. I don't scare myself, Sophie. So make sure you guys do all of those things. Trying to think what else. I think that was it. All right. Any other questions? Questions?